Hello and welcome to Personable, a podcast focused on speaking to the world's best, enabling you to become the best that you can be. My name is HarveyBracken-Smith and I'm your host. And today I'm honored to be joined by Chris Hinshaw. Chris has completed over 10 Ironman competitions, with his best results coming second twice and winning one time. He's been the coach to over 36 CrossFit Games Champions, the coach to 50 plus CrossFit Games Podium Athletes. He is a Spartan Master Trainer and has coached many popular names, including the likes of Jeff Adler, Fraser, and Froning, which you may have heard of, as well as many fire departments, police departments, and the armed forces. And he is also the owner of Aerobic Capacity. I feel incredibly honored to speak to someone like Chris today, who is widely regarded as one of the best in the world at endurance training. So Chris, I was wondering if you could take us on the journey of when you found that initial passion as a child to get into endurance training, and then what led you to completing your first Ironman race.
What a great opening question. When I was younger, I wasn't good at sport. And I grew up in a family that sport was our identity. And that was very difficult being the oldest son. My older sister happened to be, no matter what it was, whatever she touched, she was just gifted at. And same thing with my younger brother. And, it was a very difficult situation being kind of on the outside and not knowing why. I went to the practices. I did the same things. Why wasn't it where I can at least win a ribbon in a swim meet? And it's really sad, but all of my early medals were stolen from my brother. He had so many of them that he didn't even know, and I just wanted like some hardware, right? And that was difficult for me. It made me very insecure. It made me very introverted. And that of course was made childhood. Like looking back on it, it was just, where was my space? And I just didn't have that. And I felt like I was just meandering through with no self-value, certainly zero confidence. And that, of course, trickled into a bunch of other areas. But I saw the sport of triathlons on TV, and I was a mediocre swimmer. And I thought, maybe if I, work on that and I can do an Ironman such as Kona, and back then you could just enter and finish, that no one could ever take it away from me. And I was 17 years old, rolling into 18 that summer. And I thought, if I could just finish, then that's mine forever. And I was able to finish. And I found a sport, plus my body was finally maturing, and it just started from there. And it wasn't always easy, though. I remember being on one of my early races, maybe my third race, maybe my fourth race, because I think my second race was Kona. I went to a triathlon in Livermore, California, just outside the Bay Area. And it was a 2-kilometer swim that time. 1.5K. And we're on the starting line. And back then, these triathletes were bigger. It was perceived that you had to have size to be able to deal with all of the stress, right? You have to have a cushion. And it's obviously not true, right? The best of the best now are wiry, because you don't want to carry all that load, that distance. But I remember being on the starting line, and there's all these big guys around me, and I was a decent swimmer. I mean, we'd just done Ironman and Kona, and I think I got first or second out of the water. And so there I was, 18 years old, and on the front line, and there's this guy behind me, and he says to me, "Hey, little kid." He calls me little kid. And here I was. It was early in the morning. I'm freezing to death, and there's 1,000 of us lined up on this beach. And he's all, "Hey, little kid, if you don't get out of my way, I'm going to run you over." And right next to me was the world champion. His name was Scott Molina. And he looks back, he looks at me, and he says to the guy behind me, he says, "That's that Hinshaw kid. I think he could handle himself." And it was like a world champion. One knew me, but stuck up for me. And that changed the trajectory of my whole life, just right there on that beach that day.
I think that's a truly incredible story from which you've gone from not having many medals to completing one of the biggest feats ever. I mean, doing an Ironman is incredibly impressive, but I can't imagine doing it at such a young age. But I was wondering if we could delve even deeper into that transitional moment, because I think there's a lot of people that say they want to do something, say they want to get fitter. You know, everyone wants to win more trophies. But for those that don't know, an Ironman is, I wonder if, could you explain what an Ironman is and also what it actually took in that training? Because to say, oh, I'm just going to finish an Ironman, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to walk a marathon. It's, you know, it's several leagues above that. And so I was wondering if you could explain that for.
Yeah, and at the level that I was doing it at, I was racing. It wasn't that I was ever once thinking about finishing. It was monitoring my intensity in order to maximize performance. And so the swim's 2.4 miles in the ocean. It becomes being a swimmer and coming from that background, being always in the ocean as a kid. It was something that I was very comfortable in. I actually thought that the swim was a warm up. I didn't even understand why it was there. The ratios were wrong, right? The swim would take me like 48, max 50 minutes. And, here your bike ride's 4.5 hours or your run is 3, plus hours. So it didn't seem right. But yeah, 2.4 mile swim. And then you get out and you ride 112 miles on the bike. And then somewhere around, if you're good, you're finishing that bike ride around noon. And then you run 26.2 miles across the lava fields of Hawaii. And then you finish, and the finish is spectacular. I must say that there is no finish line that is quite like that. And anybody that's done an Ironman in Kona knows what I'm talking about. It lives in your head forever.
You think that when you were that young kid and you didn't have many medals to becoming one of the world's best in this given field, truly what this podcast represents? What do you think it was due to natural talent? Because you claim that you weren't good at sports as a kid, but you were very similar. So was it down to natural talent, or did you put yourself in a really strict training regime that, does hard work always beat talent in this case? But you,
genetics comes into it a lot. I mean, I really wish that I didn't have to do a 9-hour event like that. I wish I was born where I could do 100 meters and be tired after you're done. But that wasn't the way it fell. And for endurance sports, your aerobic capacity, your ability to bring in oxygen and use that oxygen, a huge amount of that is genetics. And so there were many people that trained as hard as me. And I took it very seriously because I wanted to maximize my value. And one of the things I learned right away, Bill Walton, the basketball player, was somewhat of a family friend. And we were having breakfast one morning and he said, you only have so many steps as an athlete. And, like he had real bad knees. And at the time when we had that conversation, and that resonated with me, that an athlete has a window, and that window's going to end. It will end someday. And you either take advantage of that window, maximize everything that you can within that time period so that when it ends, you don't have regret. And that is one of the biggest things that athletes deal with when the career ends, like that thought I could have been better. And so I took it seriously. But like I said, I grew up in a family that was very healthy, and genetics gave me a dramatic advantage.
When you said that note about the limited amount of steps in your athletic career, my family is a big rugby family. My uncle won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. So he played for England, and he describes to me, because we've always grown up, my cousins play it, I play it. We've always grown up being told, he says, you only get a certain amount of tackles in your career. So it's slightly differential in the fact that similarly, you only get a certain amount of time to play. But for us, it's very like every tackle you make, every hit you make, you got to think about, is it worth it? Because you only get a certain amount. But still, on that point, we're talking about the idea of genetics in that, you have good genetics for some things, you have bad things for others. But I've still noticed that within myself, I'm good at some things naturally and bad at others. But I've still gone through my own flows of getting really fit and not being fit, being good at sprinting, being good at long distance. What do you think differentiated you, aside from genetics, around how you were able to become a world-class performer? And also, what sort of training strategies do you think that you used as a young 17, 18-year-old that really differentiated you from the big guys at the time?
It was no question. It's a support structure. I was really, really lucky to dream, and people not around me, my father, my mother, mostly my father, didn't criticize my dreams. And that's a very difficult thing. Like, I remember telling my dad the first time, like, when I wanted to do Kona, here it is like I'm 17 years old, and I was the typical 17-year-old, and imagine I'm the one that's the oldest son, and here I am with my dad, who as a master swimmer, I think he had 15 world records at the time, swimming for the Olympic Club in San Francisco, full-time attorney. And I'm watching the Ironman on TV, and if you've ever seen the Ironman on TV, it's spectacular. The way that they showcase it, it really is a challenge, and they present it as a challenge. They don't sugarcoat it. It is a very difficult task. But as I'm watching it, I'm thinking that if I could do it, then I kind of have some balance in this family, because I never felt included. And I worked up the courage, and it just came out, like, I'd like to do it. And my dad, of course, looks over, and I think about that conversation now. Imagine the power that my dad had in that moment, right? Like, imagine his words, whatever he says next. Like, what if he just says, like, you? Like, he was sarcastic or condescending or disrespectful in some way. I would have just cowered. I didn't have that kind of strength. And he didn't, though. He reconfirmed, what we were watching, because, again, I was 17, right? And I just nervously, I'm like, I nod my head, and he looks over, and he's like, let's make that happen. Like, and imagine if anything else came out, like, and my dad was very, very difficult on me. I mean, very, until he died, like, very difficult. Like, did you pay your bills today? That type of difficult, as I'm a 50-year-old. And he didn't. He said, let's make that happen. And that's how it was. That if I dreamed, he was on board until the journey proved otherwise. If you want to win Kona, then let's win Kona, until we find out that there's a roadblock.
I think that's truly extraordinary. And I'm trying to go on.
That's what I think, though, that it's important, like in your situation, right? How old you are, and you have life in front of you, and it's very difficult to put yourself out there, to say something I want to do. And imagine, like, this is where, having someone, role model in your life, or a mentor, or somebody that you hold in high esteem, and that they're supportive of your dream. And like, I had this one athlete that wanted me to coach her, and she's like 5'2". I mean, she's in a weightlifting background, big legs. I mean, just big, and not built for running. And she calls me up, and she had just placed second in the CrossFit Games, and well-known athlete, been around for a long time. And I'd been in the game now for a while. And she calls me, and she lives in Australia, and I'll never forget it. I'm driving up, I-40, and, right through the heartland of the United States, and she asked me to coach her. And I asked her, there's very few questions that I'll ask, to find out whether or not it's a fit. And one of them is, what is your goals? Like, what do you want to do? And here she had just got second in the CrossFit Games, which is CrossFit's World Championships. And it's a $375,000 first place purse. Like, it's no joke. Like, you want to win, not just for the trophy, but it's the prize money and all what sponsorships comes on top. And I was fully expecting her to say, I want to win. And she didn't. She's all, I want to do a mile, 1,609 meters in under 6 minutes. And I'm like, no, Carl, like, really, like, what, why? What, like, tell me, what do you want to do? And she's like, I really do want to do that. And I'm like, why? And she says, because no one can ever take that away. It's a race of truth, right? It's the race for a distance, you and the clock. And you either do or you don't. And no one will ever believe that she did a 6-minute mile looking at her. So who is it for me to say that she can't do that? So I asked her the next question. I'm like, what's your current fastest time? And she's like, 6:37. Well, she had been in the sport forever, right? 6:37. It's not even remotely close. But again, like, my dad was with me. Who is it for me to say that can't happen? So I'm on board until The journey says that we either need to slow down, we need more time, or we need to reevaluate.
Chris, I want to run a 2-minute mile. I'm still really trying to delve down in this point we're talking about and trying to compare to a 17-year-old self. Not because I'm stuck on that part of the journey, but I'm myself, I'm 19, nearly 20.
Yep.
And I notice a lot in my age group that a lot of people, and it was probably similar when you were young, give as many excuses as to why they can't do something instead of to why they can.
Right.
So for yourself, Dad, they were like, you can do this and you go for it. That accepting the CrossFit Games goes from 6:37 to believing that she can get that up sub 6-minute mile.
That's right.
But you were also talking about that for you, the most important thing was this support network. But I think to an extent, there's only so much you can do to create that support network. You know, like you can't really change who your parents are. You can't change your siblings. You can't put yourself in a more affluent area or change school. So internally, for people that want to make a change to push themselves to their peak athletic performance and whatever that may be, whether they're young or old or whatever, what advice would you have for them in their own head to truly believe that they can do it and then go about actually accomplishing that goal?
Here's what's interesting in life is that, and so I'm 60 years old and so I do a bit of reflecting and where were there opportunities that I wasn't aware of. And the biggest one is that you need to constantly challenge your boundaries. And, you know, bigger said than done. It's easy to say that, but people need to really understand that you must try new things. You must experiment. You must actually demonstrate courage on a regular basis, because if you always play it safe, if you never take risk, if you never challenge yourself, then you never grow as an individual. You become stale. You become stagnant. It would be no different right now if you started running a 5K every morning at 8:00 and you did the same course, the same pace, same time. All of it's the same. Eventually, you're going to start gaining weight because the body is adapted to that stimulus. You're just playing it too safe. And this is what happens with people when they get into their working years. And I was in the same boat. What I'm doing is convinced that my role from when I got out of school and, you know, have a family, get a house, get in debt is I'm going to make money. I'm in my working career mode. Well, if you just sit idle in terms of your fitness, then you know what's going to happen? You're going to get worse. And what I didn't have back then was balance. Most people don't have balance. They don't have the consistency where they're challenging themselves on multiple fronts in parallel, whether it's your education, right? And building your knowledge, building your fitness, building your relationships, building your business. You need to be in a mode of taking risk, having courage, because at the end of the day, look at you here in this podcast. You are incredible at your age and how comfortable you are on the camera where you want to go. And that takes confidence. Most people, especially Gen Z, they're lacking in that. They're playing it safe. And we see it now, right now, where the military enrollment, fire, law enforcement is at record historic lows. Never seen numbers this low ever.
Yeah, that's
the risk, the courage that it takes. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's they're quite extreme views, which I don't align myself to. But figures like Andrew Tate. Have you heard of Andrew Tate?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think the reason he has got so unbelievably famous, I mean, I could go into the specifics on it, but a large part of this rise in so-called weak men, people not willing to take opportunity, people not being able to get out of the comfort of their home, people not pushing themselves, and the sort of extreme views. You know, whenever someone says something outrageous, you want to listen, and I think that's why he's gone viral on that. But you know, similarly in the UK, when Rishi Sunak announced in his manifesto to have national service, there was the biggest outcry you've ever heard from from anyone, because the idea of having to be forced into an army, whereas, 100 years ago, the idea of going into an army and representing your country was the greatest thing you could do. And more people would die from suicide, not from things they had seen at war, but rather from feeling that they weren't giving out to the war effort. So I think that's a really interesting example. I want to get into more on your coaching side. There are coaches, and I remember my dad saying this to me when I first saw him in the gym. I was like 10 years old, and he'd go to this personal trainer, right? This personal trainer, to be fair to him, was an ex-bodybuilder, so that was fair enough. But I'd look in this gym, and no offense to, body positivity more, but like, not just like overweight, but obscenely fat personal trainers in the gym. And I just could not understand it at all, because they're supposed to be like a role model for those type of people. And the reason I'm making that example is you were both an athlete and you've become a coach. You worked as a coach. And I think it can be very hard just because you've done something doesn't mean you're able to teach other people to do the same. Similarly, with people like Frank Lampard, I think he was one of the greatest footballers of all time, became a coach in the Premier League, and then the team did really bad. So sort of like a dual question, why did you become a coach? And what do you think made you so good at it to end up coaching the best in the world and being the best in the world at what you do?
That's I'm very impressed that you recognize that. I don't think a lot of people realize that, especially if you're on the outside and you're not really knowledgeable in health and fitness. And you realize, in your middle age years that it's important. And so you want to regain your fitness. And so you go online and you look, and it's very confusing of who's right, who's wrong. There's so many conflicting ideas, right? That, it's like back when I grew up, eggs were like healthy and then they weren't healthy. And then it was be careful of the yolk and then be careful. And now it's like full circle again. And I get it. It's very confusing. The key, like you said, is that, in my opinion, if I write a workout, if I've never done the workout before, how do I know what it feels like? How do I know that stimulus is the right stimulus for you? And because the way I write workouts, I dictate the volume, right? The specific amount of time or distance. I dictate the level of intensity, whether it's speed or the loads you lift. But I also dictate the recovery, whether it's passive rest or active rest, right? Whether you're sitting and doing nothing, you're actively moving. And then if you are moving, like let's say you're walking, how fast should you be walking and for what duration? All of those variables matter. Well, if you've never done it before, what you will see from coaches is in between these intervals, what I want you to do is a 100-meter walk, not in a specific time, just walk 100. Well, I've seen people I've walked 105 minutes versus doing 100 meters in 1 minute. They're very different, right? One is a catch-all for a coach that doesn't know the intensity side and the volume and the damage that would do and how much recovery they should be doing. They don't know. That's where I'm always suspect. If you've never done it before, then how are you going to really know when it matters? And what I'm talking about is any coach, in my opinion, if I just got you to train and didn't do anything, we're going to get you fit. We're going to get some reasonable level of fitness. The problem is that what everybody wants is efficiency. They want it faster. They want it easier.
They want it now. They want it now.
And that's what's called an athlete-centered model versus if you want to run a half marathon, then you just go online and you get a PDF and it just says run, 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 run. It doesn't care who you are, your background, your injury rates, your age, your goal, any of it. An athlete-centered model looks at who you are and it creates that precision that you have around the event itself. And that's why I think that people need to be looking, and if they are soliciting ideas, because let's face it, coaches are more accessible than they've ever been. Most coaches have PDFs and samples of workouts. Hey, Chris, I heard you talking today. Do you have blah, 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 blah? If I have a PDF, I'll just send it to you. It's that easy. So why would you settle for going to Runner's World if you want to do a half marathon and just running every day? Why wouldn't you get a little bit more precise? And if I don't answer, there's another one right behind me.
When I was thinking about how to prepare for this podcast, something I'm being incredibly interested in from a young age is this is the concept of entrepreneurship. So I started reselling clothes when I was young, and then trying to learn to trade stocks. And, I say all these things and they sound good, but some things I was really good at and some things I was really bad at. And I don't think it was just unique to me, but kids my age, even going back a decade, were interested in the idea of side hustles and ways to make money. But everything was, the videos that we could click on were, how to make $100,000 a month, as if it's the easiest thing in the world. Mr. Beast, if you've heard of him, the biggest YouTuber in the world, his videos were like, I've given $100,000 to a homeless person. And so it made all of these incredibly hard top 1% things make it seem like anyone can get it just here and there. Right. And why I talk about, entrepreneurship and fitness and linking the two together is both have coaches. Yeah. So they're the two industries I can think of the most. Obviously, you have like music teachers and stuff like that and education and whatnot. But the scalable extent of both entrepreneurship and fitness has got so big, and there are so many coaches and there are so many people making money without knowing what they're talking about. It can be really dangerous. Like, I would consider myself a reasonably fit person, and I've gone through multiple different fitness trainers, of which some might have millions of followers, but it doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. And on top of that, with the rise of modern advertising, if something looks good and sounds good, people are going to try and click on it. Whereas when I went on your page, it was literally just, my name's Chris Hinshaw. I've completed 10 Ironman. I've come second in 2. I've won 1. I've coached 30 of the top CrossFitters of all time, including literally the Cristiano Ronaldos of the sport. So how do you go about competing and truly showing that this is what works, even though it's not as flashy or over advertised as the others?
Wow. It's interesting for me. So I do a lot of education seminars. I mean, that's really my passion, is the education, because I come from a sales background. So I was in Silicon Valley, selling for 25 years. I specialized in cable assemblies. So like the power cord from Apple. So we did 220 million of these cords. I learned early on about sales, and I learned about relationship building. And that was one of the pieces that has stuck with me, that I personally need to enjoy the person, whoever it is, whether it's a customer, right? If it's a director of materials manager, whatever, I need to really like that person, because we're going to do some very difficult things together. And it's no different than being a coach or being an athlete. There's always going to be challenges, but are we going to work through those things together? And so that I learned, I learned a lot about early on of making sure that foundation was in place. The problem, like you said, is that there is a lot of social media allows a lot of gee whiz factor, right? A lot of buzzwords, a lot of glitter and limelight. And I haven't done that, because I'm really following what I want to do. Like, I sent you a video, what I did over the weekend. And, so last week I was with the CrossFit Games Champions, Jeff Adler, who we've worked together for 3 years. And he did a workout that was 500 meters in 1 minute and 45 seconds, a minute of rest. He did that 4 times. And then he ran a mile. And the goal was to run the mile in 4:55 to 4:57. And he ran it in 4:56 in a workout. And this guy weighs 90 kilos, 5'9". And 2 days after that, I was down in Quantico, Virginia, where the FBI, the U.S. Marine Corps is, and I went through the officer's candidate course. They have a thing called Quigley, and it's basically in a swamp, and you're going through culverts and under barbed wire and fighting the snakes. And that's what I did this weekend. I didn't get anything for it other than my own personal gratification. And that's what's driving me is, do I get some value out of this relationship? It's not just me pushing anymore. It's, if we do a workout together, like if I have you do something, I want that workout to tell me something, to teach me something that I want to learn. And that's what online programming has done, is it compressed your learning curve, where you're not just looking at one result. What you can do is, I bet you 50,000 people do my workouts in a week, and it gives me access to some incredible data. And that data is what churns me into the next day and the next week. And that's what separates me from others is like my background's in finance. I'm a numbers guy. I love equations and algorithms and I love scraping information off of websites and Python code. I'm into it. I like when I see patterns within workouts, within people, and I'm talking about the demographic that I focus on, not the elites. I mean, everybody says, oh, you're training CrossFit champions, but they're not specialists. Like Jeff Adler, I just said he runs a mile in 4:56 and runners out there going, that's so slow. They're right for a runner. But this guy can also that afternoon put 365 pounds over his head. And so that's what drives me. And I don't see that a lot. I see people driven by the money. And money obviously is important, but what are you going to do tomorrow when this all dries up? And in coaching right now, AI is wiping out people left and right. Because you could have AI write an incredible training program right now, and it will be better than 50% of the coaches out there, and they're going to vanish. You have to evolve. You have to be aware of where this industry is going. We caught an incredible wave because of COVID. Online programming is going to always be around, but AI is going to take over. It's so easy to right now use AI to write workouts, to write progressions that are athlete-centered.
What do you think can be done on a national scale in the US, or you could even look at it on an international scale, in terms of education? Because when you're talking about your business there, you're saying you're driven by the personal satisfaction you get from helping someone to succeed. You're good at the data, so you can help people improve. But I would argue, and myself that's uninformed would argue that 95% of those online trainers are interested in profit and profit alone. And that's even right. If the data they look at is not, is this person doing this workout and getting fitter? It's instead how many, how much monthly recurring revenue can I get from these individuals? So do you think it's an education thing that needs to occur? Do you think it's laws on advertising? What can be done, if anything, to change this?
Yeah, I don't see that changing. I mean, unfortunately nowadays what's happening is that let's say that you're a coach. I could take your programming right now. I could buy it. I could have AI modify it slightly with my spin. And now I didn't put any effort in. And that's how I can generate all of these training programs. And it's that simple. The problem is that it's going to be very confusing to the public of what to pick and what not to pick. That's why any athlete that's out there, you've got to do your homework. And does it logically make sense? Everybody wants to just do that red pill, blue pill, right? And just be quick about it, right? That immediate satisfaction. But you've got to, as an athlete, take some ownership, so take some responsibility. You're telling me that you picked that coach when in fact they've never actually done anything, or maybe they've done something, but you suspect them of juicing or something and cheating in some way, bypassing. It's not ever going to be a fit. What I've done is I could scale way back and I could write all these different training programs, 5K, 10K. I could do Ironman programs. I could do row programs. I could do all these programs. But what I'm trying to do is test my ability as a coach to see whether or not this methodology that works for an elite level CrossFitter and also age groupers, whether it's teens and masters, but also, does it work in firehouses? Does it work in law enforcement? Does it work in every branch of the military service? Test my ability. And I want to do that not just with the individuals, but I also do it with teams. I do it with groups and then online programming. I'm very transparent about what I do within the public. I don't charge any money for my elite level CrossFit athletes. Anybody who's good, right, that's going to go to the Olympics or World Championships, it's always free. Because what I'm doing is I'm almost experimenting on that population to find value for the recreational athlete, find the cheat code. And I don't see that happening out there. I don't see how regulations are going to come in. I think it's going to become more of the Wild West, and people are going to say, oh, I just got burned. I lost 3 months. I got injured. Yeah, you got to take some responsibility. And that's where I unfortunately, I don't see a lot of. the athlete does not take any responsibility in the process. They push it all towards the coach. And I'm never going to do that. If I write a workout and you fail in that workout, that's not my fault. You whatever reason, whether it's extracurricular, sleep, diet, you should have been able to do it. And that's the athlete ownership piece. I do my part, and I do it, and I make a lot of effort that I know it's going to be successful, because what I'm trying to do is have you do one workout that feeds into another. If you knew the grand plan were 50 workouts from now, you would look at it and go, that's impossible. But if we stair step it, then we're going to be successful. But you got to do your part. And I don't see that a lot. And that's the mistake. Everybody just wants to take the pill. And that's not how fitness works. It's a lifelong piece.
How did you form your methodology? What is it, and how has it adapted over time?
That's interesting. So I got an opportunity to coach a CrossFit athlete in 2012. I'd been in the sport for 4 years, and this guy had won the CrossFit Games in 2008, and he was falling further and further away from the podium. This guy weighed 220 pounds. He was 5'9", and he would finish dead last in every endurance event. And he asked me if I would be willing to help him. And I'll never forget it, because we talk about athletes being coachable, and what does that really mean? What being coachable is, you're interested. You want to know what I'm doing. You want to understand it. You want buy-in. And that's very important, that you buy into it. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. And then the other is that you'll always do whatever I ask of you. And this guy did that. And that year, 7 months later, he went from finishing dead last in every endurance event to winning 3 out of 4 endurance events at the CrossFit Games and getting a 3rd place in the 4th one. And he placed 2nd overall, turned his entire career around. And that's how I ended up getting my start. Now, the way I programmed for him was, I knew as a runner, a triathlete, what small doses of strength, what CrossFit did. I was doing it 3 days a week. And when I started, I was broken. Couldn't do a pull-up. Most pull-ups I've ever done was 1. And not only did it rehabilitate my neglected muscle groups, but all of a sudden, at the age of 45, I was seeing speed numbers in running that I hadn't seen in 25 years. And within 3 years of doing the sport, my mile time was sub 5 minutes. My 400 time was sub 60 seconds. I was doing 5Ks under 17 minutes. And the only thing that I added in was 2 days of running and 3 days of CrossFit. And that was it. And so I thought, what if I took a pure CrossFit athlete, a strength-based athlete, and gave him what I know, which was pure endurance training, slow him down and work the other side of the equation, right? The slow twitch, aerobic, zone 2 pacing type stuff. And turned out that year I worked with 3 people, and they finished 2nd, 5th, and 9th. And then it just went from there. I worked with 55 games athletes in 2015. All of them were free. Well, I had a full-time job. It was kind of like what you said earlier, my side hustle. I loved it. I was passionate about it. And if I could help, great. But I was collecting information about what worked and didn't work for this type of athlete. The athlete because most athletes don't know this. I was born on the endurance end of the muscle fiber spectrum, right? The slow twitch side. And then like Usain Bolt is on the other end. Most people have a 50-50 blend of fast twitch and slow twitch. They're always going to be, and I don't mean this negatively because you'll see why, mediocre. They're not going to be great in anything. You have to have these birth defects, abnormally large lungs, abnormally, ability to bring in and utilize oxygen, high percentages of certain fiber types to be able to do that. That's why genetics comes in. But what's happened is that in terms of health, the greatest health that we've ever seen is coming from that middle population of person where they're a hybrid athlete. They can be strong, but they also can develop that ability to endure. And it's 99.9% of the people that are out there. And that's my space that I focus in.
That point about wanting to be coachable really stuck out to me. Because as a young kid, when, a lot of, especially in the UK where I grew up, a lot of kids are playing sport. And when you think of coachable, people as a 9, 10-year-old, you think of the kids that are the teacher's pet who just listen to what the teacher says, and the kids that are uncoachable are the ones that mess about. And I would say that I fell more into the teacher's pet category than anything else. But there was something, and my dad references this to me the whole time. He's really annoyed about it to this day, and it took me years to get over. And as I was saying at the start of the podcast, my sport has been rugby, so it's very physical, high contact based.
Yeah.
And my coach said to me, I'm like the equivalent of a quarterback in rugby. I'm the one passing the ball, and in rugby where there's a lot more passing. You're trying to get the ball around. So some running, but mostly passing the ball. And he said to me, Harvey, I don't want you to tackle. Because what he wanted, I was smaller, I was playing for a year or two up, and he said, Harvey, I don't want you to tackle. And so I got this thing in my head where I told myself, I can't tackle at all. And for the next few years that when I got a bit bigger and I had to go to school, I had to tackle. I couldn't tackle because I mentally told myself that I can't. And I've had other coaches where they tell me you're too small or you're too weak or give it to someone else. You can't do this. And so I, at least within myself, the past few years, I've got a lot fitter and stronger and better at rugby, at least within relative to my own game. But that's actually mostly been without the help of coaching. Yes. So linking that back to you, I think the main thing around that is the idea of trust. I feel betrayed by those coaches because sure, I wasn't the best athlete at that point in time, but they never believed in me. So it's like that CrossFit athlete who was the bottom. I was the bottom in my own category. So how can athletes find a coach that they can trust so that they can be like, I will do everything that you want me to do?
I mean, it's like anything in life too, though. It's not just like, it's easy to look at health and fitness this way with coaching and athletes, but it's the same thing in the workforce. And what I always think about is when I was working and what was driving me to try and be successful. It's really an interesting thing because, think about this. In the workplace, you are having to be incentivized to do something that's extraordinary, something that's high risk, something that you don't want to do, extra hours, right? Coming in early, like a higher level of ownership without, any return. And that's what athletes do. I am trying to get you to do something that you don't believe you can do, right? And you don't want to do because it's so freaking hard. Yet in some way I'm able to do it. And that's where it's like, I think where a really good coach can come in of recognizing what we're trying to do. There's so many similarities in coaching and in the business world that run in parallel. And one of the biggest pieces is, like you said, you have to have a sense of empathy. You can't just come in and be a big shot. Like I remember my first day in going in the CrossFit gym, and keep in mind, my last race, I got second in a world championships. And so when I go in that day, that's who I remember as being, that's me. I was full of spit and vinegar. I'm ready to go hot. I didn't mind losing, right? That wasn't the issue. I just like to give it the gas. I love to go and throttle, especially against somebody. I just enjoyed competing, right? My favorite moment in Kona is the last 10 seconds when you want to stop the clock because of the adrenaline rush. It's the most alive you will ever be. And I miss that. But when I pulled into the parking lot that day, I'll never forget it. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. They were doing pull-ups, not one, they were doing, looked like thousands of them. And they were taking a barbell, and picking it up and putting it overhead. Men were doing 106, or they were doing 60 kg, 60 kg. And I had never picked up a barbell before. And it was so intimidating for me that when the group got together, the class afterwards, I fired up the car and drove home. Like I was so afraid, and that sticks with me. I don't find the yelling, like the David Goggins, I don't find that at all remotely confidence building. You're not going to shame me into doing anything because what I'm being asked to do is to take a risk. So here's an example of risk in a workout. If you're doing 4 laps around the track and I know that you're going to slow down in that third lap, That's where everybody will slow down. So where am I going to be pushing you and encouraging you to take risk? I want you to push through that third lap. And the reason why you want to slow down in that third lap is because you don't believe that you have the energy to maintain that intensity, that pace for that fourth and final lap. So you're resting before it, and so that you can finish strong. But I'm not going to allow that to happen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to encourage you to take the risk. And then that final lap, what I want to do is I want to prove to you that you had it inside of you all the time. And so I'm going to encourage you to take that risk, because the only growth in that workout is doing something that you didn't want to do. If you always do it the same way, if you always slow down in the third lap, then you're not going to improve. And that is how life is. You have to do something that is against what you want to do, something extraordinary. You have to take that risk. So in that last lap, that's where I'm going to say, you got to go. Yeah, I know it's going to hurt. I know you don't want to, but you have to, because that's where growth occurs. And I want you to know that if you fail, at least we went for it, because the next time you do it, it's going to become easier. And like when I did Ironman the last time, I remember I picked up my bike the next morning and I said to myself, I could do this 7 days in a row. Now that's super brain damaged, but it was because I had stair-stepped my way to be able to finish second place and think, man, I could do this right now. You have to always do something that's extraordinary. And it's no different than what you're doing in school, what you do at work. You have to, because when you finish that, everything below it becomes easier.
I feel like it's an incredible feat for an athlete to be able to push past that, and for you to be with them in that moment where they push past the previous boundaries that they had in their own head.
Yeah.
But as I say, even with online programming, at least when you're, in person, the likelihood is that person is still by themselves. Again, I'm uninformed and don't have the data, but I would make a presumption, it's similar to the start of the year when people have their New Year's resolutions.
Yep.
And they're highly motivated and they train for a few weeks and then they stop. Yep. But I'd say that'd be similar throughout other parts of the year. And I would argue the reason why people stop is because no one's watching, it doesn't really matter, it's comfortable. But how do you create that level of discipline in your own head that doing the extraordinary becomes the norm?
This is where people have to have some kind of a goal. I don't know what the statistics are on it, but most people don't have a goal when they're doing fitness. They're just doing fitness every day, and it's not sustainable. The amount of fallout retention is so low without a goal. And so you have to find some kind of a goal. The problem that most people do, though, unfortunately, is when they pick a goal, they pick something extremely challenging. And they make it so that it feels like work. You've got to find a way to do your fitness and have it be enjoyable. And what I mean by that is a reward. So here's a good example. So zone 2 training is low intensity, cardiorespiratory training. And the purpose is to find a heart rate, which is defining your intensity, that delivers a cardiorespiratory adaptation. So there is a minimum level of intensity that you need in order to create that. Lower than that is what we call zone 1, which is recovery. Recovery is all about pumping your heart rate up to flush out, fatigued muscle fibers, the contaminants, get good nutrients in and flush it back out. So zone 2, you could take Maffetone 180 minus your age. So you're 20. So
20 tomorrow.
Okay. Beautiful. Happy birthday to you. So 180 minus, so your target would be 160 would be your rough range. Now you would have to get some kind of a VO2 max type test to be precise, but let's just say that using a formula, it's good ballpark. So to plus or minus to get a range, a bracket, you would go +5, so 165, and -5, 155. So there's your range of zone 2. Now, what I would do is I would tell you, here's what I'm interested in. I want you to do this zone 2, and your minimum goal distance, here's your goal, is 20 minutes within that range. Now, it's going to take you a good 5 minutes to get within that target, but start slowly. And what I want you to do is I want you to find a speed. Now, let's just say you pick 6 minutes per kilometer. All right. So you pick that speed. What I'm interested in is a nice consistent speed from start to finish. And you're going to maintain that speed, but you got to stay within that range. So
but would you not have to drop the speed if you felt because sometimes, sorry to cut you off, sometimes when I'm running, I feel like even at consistent speed, my heart rate starts to drop a bit. So I'd have to slow down.
Correct. And so what's happening with you is what happens with everybody else is that because they don't have any capacity. So when you're starting out at that 6-minute pace, what the brain does is it gives you a very small percentage of slow twitch muscle fibers to match that speed. All your other fibers are now resting. So remember, I said 50% of your fibers are fast twitch, high intensity, right? Speed.
Yeah.
So those fibers are allowing you to move at that speed. Well, they now will fatigue eventually, and the brain will turn them off, and it will simultaneously recruit new ones. You're still running. Those will fatigue. The brain will turn them off. Well, eventually it will work its way around to your original recruited slow twitch fibers. And this is where the stamina piece comes in. The reason why your heart rate climbs is because those original slow twitch fibers haven't had enough time to recover to go back in the game. But what you do is you say, no problem. I only got 8 minutes to go. Let's say I got 50% of my arsenal is fast twitch. I'll just bring in my fast twitch to finish the workout. And that's when your heart rate goes up because your fast twitch fibers will need more oxygen. And now because of increase in oxygen demand, your heart rate, your delivery mechanism will go up in response. And so when your heart rate goes up, it's telling you you're about to lose the stimulus. So you don't ever want fast twitch fibers to come into a low intensity workout because you just ruined it. So what you do is...
Why do you ruin it?
Because it turns a slow twitch enduring workout into a fast twitch speed-based workout. So one of the major measures of aerobic fitness is how fast can you recover? How fast can you lower heart rate? Well, the way to do that is by doing slow twitch muscle fiber development workouts. If you always reward your slow twitch fibers by saying, I know you're fatigued. I know you don't have any more capacity. I got 50% of my arsenal is fast twitch. What you're telling those slow twitch fibers is you don't have to develop an ability to endure. Imagine if you allow those fibers, those slow twitch fibers to recover so that they can go back in the game and it can keep recycling over and over and over again. This is where elite marathon runners run 150 miles in the week is because they don't want 26.2 miles to be a stamina failure. You want to tell those fibers, you know what? This is a slow twitch recovery workout. It's an aerobic workout. So you're going to go back in the game. And that's what you're trying to teach. Faster isn't better. Not all the time, especially if you're building foundation. And a lot of people don't realize this. Like when you're out of shape, why go hard? Because any fitness will help. Build your foundation, your structure, your ligaments, your tendons, your bones. Matter of fact, if you were a baby boomer, like your dad, what I would do is I would tell dad, you know what? I don't want you to run. What I want you to do is I want you to put on a backpack, a ruck, and I want you to load that ruck so that when you walk, your heart rate gets into your 180 minus your age zone. We're going to create cardiorespiratory adaptation by walking. And that's how you would do it. He would focus on getting to 20 minutes. So here's the deal. What will happen is you'll get up to, 165, right? Like you said, there's now your sign that you're recruiting fast twitch fibers. You need to stop and walk. Why walking is it okay? Because it's slow twitch. It's maintaining the integrity of the workout. And you're going to walk until you hit 155. That's a sign that you've recovered so that those original slow twitch fibers can go back in and support the speed that you picked. Now, your job is to not walk in the 20 minutes. You're going to do it twice a week until you don't walk. Imagine how it feels when you finally make it to 20 minutes. It's measurable. Every athlete, it doesn't matter who it is, they have to feel success. They have to achieve milestones. But it can't be a trick. It has to be real, it has to be tangible, measurable. You have to believe it. If I tell you this workout is impossible and you do it easily. There's no satisfaction. You have to look at it and go, that's impossible. And when you achieve it, that's where your momentum comes from. And most athletes never feel success. Why? Because they're mediocre. They're out of shape. You're always going to be slow. Chances are you're always going to finish last for a long time. That doesn't mean you can't have wins. I told Adidas this. Adidas, we did this project Personal Best, and they interviewed me. And they said, hey, we're interested in you potentially helping us with this new marketing plan. And I saw it in the background. It said Project PB as in Personal Best. And they said, we want to know your thoughts on winning. And I said to them, I think that you guys believe that winning or finishing the 5K and getting a personal record, a personal best, is what it feels like to win. If you finish dead last and you set a personal best, that's not what it feels like to win. That's not what it feels like. Winning is all about the opportunity that it creates. In particular, you guys give them $250 pairs of shoes. Why don't you make a high-tech shoe that's affordable for that athlete, that recreational athlete, right? Give them performance. The other thing is give them great coaching. There is a unique situation in high-end coaching. Most athletes don't know because they're not aware it even exists. They don't even know that the other athletes have these skills, that you are on the outside. You're not in the club. Why aren't you making it available to everybody so that they could feel these wins? Because that's what motivates the elites to go from day to day to day to day. You have to create wins. It doesn't be about money. It's about doing something, doing the seemingly impossible. Graduating from college is nothing different than this. It's impossible to finish college, but you do it. And when you do it, it's yours. And they're building off of that to the next, to the next. Imagine your tower is just built from wins, real wins.
I'm not sure of his or her name or the year, but I can recall reading about an Olympic wrestling coach, and every single workout that he did, he made up, there's 50 to 100, whatever, different types of exercises that they could do, train certain muscle groups. And, you train the common 10 to 20 exercises a week. But every single session, you would pick another one of those workouts that you would then set a personal best in. Yeah. So those wrestlers felt, it doesn't matter if it's like curls or calf raises or anything. Every single workout, they would get a personal best. And I think that truly transformed that program. And I think they won that year. Completely almost made up story, but I think it still stands true nonetheless.
Those things are important, and but it's also knowledge too. So what you want to do is you don't want to you're trying to develop somebody in multiple paths in parallel. So like, for example, here's a good example. So let's just say that I give you a workout and it's 6 150-meter sprints with a 3-minute walk in between them. All right. So I would tell you is this, I want 5 fast steps. And this is the difference between coaching and programming. Coaching is when you're present, but you can write an online program with instructions so that the athlete knows the focal point, the targeted adaptation within it. And that is a very, very important skill that you don't see in online programs. If you don't know what the purpose is of the workout, why are you doing it? So I would tell you about 5 fast steps. And then what I want you to do is continue to accelerate to your maximum speed over the next, let's say, till you reach 50 meters in. And now what's going to happen is that because of that level of intensity, and you're only 1/3 of the way done, you're going to feel emotional distress. That's what you're going to feel. You're going to feel anxiety because of the amount of intensity, and you're not even close to being done. And what I will tell you is when you feel that anxiety, what I want you to do is float. I want you to reduce the intensity until that goes away. And I want you to
reduce speed.
Right. So you're going off of feel. And what I'm saying is reduce that level of anxiety, because I want you to know that anxiety is something that you can control, that you can manipulate. So I want you to slow down until you reach the 100-meter point. And now what I want is a reacceleration and a drive, a final push to the finish. And what's the purpose of that? I'm trying to get you sensitive to these emotional sensations. It's not just about physical. You're trying to train these things in parallel. Same thing holds true, like we said. If you always slow down in the third lap on a mile, 4 laps around the track, I'm going to write a workout that makes you go fast where you normally would slow. But I'm not going to bring it up to you. You're going to look at the workout and go, wow, I got 400-meter intervals with 2 minutes of rest, but man, that third one's freaking smoking. I'm going to write it in a way that deals with your weakness, but I'm not going to point it out because I'm trying to empower you. I'm trying to make it so that it's your idea. You found it. Right now I'm training people for the CrossFit Games. Like I told you, Jeff Adler just did a sub 5-minute mile. Never done one before, ever. It is critical if you want to become a leader, a champion, you have to do things that you don't think that you personally could do. Because at the end of the day, you want to bring on board the person who's the most capable because of their level of confidence to do the seemingly impossible. They've done it 1,000 times. I'll do it again. So when he did it, it was just, wow, like that was effortless. And I didn't even think it was possible. That's how you build it. You're doing workouts where an athlete looks at it and says, that can't be done. Imagine what it feels like when you do it.
Chris, something you've talked about a lot is breathing. I've been listening to you on prior podcasts and comparing the, regular format breathing from, say, a swimmer who went through 4 strokes and then you breathe, 4 strokes, you breathe. Yeah. Whereas other people, you were saying that when the brain doesn't know when the next breath is coming, you have a big problem.
Yeah.
And I thought about that a lot because my brother, for example, he plays like academy rugby. He's 18 years old and is really pushing himself in that regard. But he struggles a lot with his breathing. Yeah. I've never introduced this concept to him before. And similarly myself, when I'm pushing myself as a recreational, I'm not a professional athlete, but as a recreational athlete, when I'm pushing myself, I don't think I've ever thought in my entire life, every 10 seconds I'm going to take a breath. How can I go about, and my brother who's trying to play sports at a really high level, and athletes all across the world, think about breathing when playing their sport, when doing CrossFit, and go about improving it to help the brain and to help you in general?
It's so interesting that you bring this up. So I happen to be at it's called the Gauntlet, and we invite the Royal Marines. The United States Marine Corps invites the Royal Marines over to Quantico. And they had one of the things that they competed against was a rugby match. And I was able to stand near the sideline. And one of the things I teach, groups, units, in military, in fire, let's say that you and I are firefighter buddies and a fire, okay. We have to go into a fire with all of our bunker gear, 60 pounds, and we've got a hose pack and we're on air. So let's say we got 80 pounds with us and we're climbing stairs. If I ask you as a firefighter, how are you doing as we're climbing stairs, meaning your level of fatigue? You're always going to give me the thumbs up. I'm good to go. That's just what happens. Same thing in military. And so what I teach is observation. It's offensive to me that as your buddy in the fighting this fire, that I would ask you such a stupid question. I should know based upon what I hear and observe whether or not you're in control of your intensity as you climb those stairs. And if you're not, that I should voluntarily slow down. Because what if now you make it to the top and you're a liability to me? Your machismo did nothing to help us accomplish the task, the mission. And so what I should do is I should slow down to put us in the best position. And I teach that with teams about awareness of your teammates. And there is a massive tendency to highlight weaknesses, and so, you got to keep up. Why are you telling me that? Why isn't everybody else just slowing down so that we can all stay together? And one of the major measures of observation is the breath. When your intensity goes up, your demand for oxygen goes up. That's your aerobic system. And as a result of that, your heart rate goes up. If you keep increasing your intensity, you're going to go into a non-sustainable pace. refer to this as your death zone on Mount Everest, right? So the death zone on Everest is 26,000 feet, meaning above that, there's insufficient oxygen to keep the brain alive. So if you stay in that death zone, with 100% certainty, you die. So if you do summit, it's a race against time where you've got to get back down below that death zone. Well, that is what we know as your lactate threshold, your maximum sustainable pace. And we can monitor that by observing and listening to the breathing rhythm. So there's two things when I talk about breath. One is it a reliable and predictable pattern, or is it random? Because the brain's responsible for the recruitment of your muscle fibers. So if the intensity is high, the brain is going to recruit more muscle fibers. Well, okay. The brain needs to know when the next dose of energy is coming in. It's very important, right? And that's your oxygen that you're inhaling. Well, what if it's randomized breathing where it's like you take an inhale in 5 seconds and you take one in 10 seconds and then you take one in 3 seconds and then you take one in 7 seconds. It's random. How does the brain not know you're going to go into a 1 minute breath hold? And so what the brain will do is hold a bigger percentage of fibers in reserve because it doesn't know what's happening. But a swimmer, they have the best breathing rhythm of all, right? So you mentioned 4 count. Imagine just breathing on the right side every stroke. So if it's breath, 1, 2, 3, breath, 1, 2, 3, breath. That's what we call a 4 count breathing cadence. Your inhale and exhale is occurring within this 4 count. Now, when's the next breath? 1, 2, 3, breath, 1, 2, 3, breath. That's what I'm talking about, the rhythm. But the second and the most important is the cadence of the breath. When to know these rugby players are out of control in their breathing. And it's amazing to me that they should know when their opponent is gassed based upon the cadence of the breath. So I mentioned earlier about this lactate threshold, your maximum sustainable pace. This is a interesting barrier where it's genuinely individualized and it has a different level for every movement you do. So every movement, no matter what it is, has a different maximum sustainable pace. And that's what makes it so challenging. But the breath is the one where it exposes that level. So when you're in control of your breathing, you will take in the movement of running 4 steps or more per cycle of breath. So 4 steps is what I just demonstrated with swimming. So it would be an exhale, which always occurs on an impact, and then 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, exhale on the 4th step. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, More than likely it's 2 steps exhale, 2 steps inhale, in and out through the mouth because of the level of intensity.
So you should you balance it?
Yes. And you always start at an impact. So whether it's your left foot or right foot, and that's the way you're going to know your cadence. So it should be as you're jogging. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2. Now it's anything a 4 higher. The reason why I mention a 4 is because when you go to a 3, exhale, 1, 2, exhale, 1, 2, exhale, you have crossed over in a non-sustainable pace. So let's say you and I are playing rugby, or Conor McGregor is fighting Khabib. Mm-hmm. What you will hear from McGregor is a 2 count, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, or a 3 count, meaning he's in trouble. And Khabib knows that he's in trouble. He's in a non-sustainable pace. He's in his death zone. He has to continue to slow down. And if he doesn't, the acidity that will accumulate by being above that maximum sustainable pace will begin to accumulate because you're recruiting fast twitch fibers, which you mentioned earlier. If you don't slow down and that acidity continues to accumulate, the muscles will eventually shut down and you'll be forced below that line. So it's really in rugby. One is awareness of yourself. Am I hyperventilating? That's a sign you're in trouble. And what about your opponent? So imagine your opponent's on a 2 count breathing cadence. Their muscles are not going to survive at 100% capacity for long. That's the person that you want to pick on. So these tactics, this awareness is what I want athletes to understand. And it doesn't matter who you are, this knowledge. And that's why I said at the beginning of our conversation, I'm a huge fan of the education piece, because that's what's going to keep people in it coming back. They don't feel stupid. Like a lot of people I start with, they don't even know what direction to run on the track. It's not embarrassing. It just happens. But imagine you realize not only, that your running mechanics, your pacing, but you could feel a cloud go overhead because you're so aware of your surroundings. Take you, for example. Let's say you get hurt on running and you want to ride a bike. You find out that riding a bike is second best, movement pattern's the same. Is there an optimal way you should ride to maximize your running? It's a good question. And this is knowledge. It's not just doing. It's like you take ownership as an athlete of like, how can I become smarter about what my body's telling me? And so I would tell you is like, what I want you to do is I want you to go out and run for 30 seconds and count your number of steps. Let's just say you take in that 30 seconds, you take 90 steps. 90 times 2, right, for a minute is 180 steps in a minute. What should your cycling cadence be to maximize crossover? An RPM is a complete turning of the pedal strokes. Essentially, it's 2 steps. So that would be 90 RPMs. So I would tell you, I'd like to have you the bulk of your workouts at 90 RPMs. If you want it harder intensity, then go to higher gear. Simple concept, but it's knowledge. And so that's what we want. We want to build where it's not just these scientific big words. What keeps people going back is their performance is improving, but their confidence has gone up, not just physically, but it's the knowledge piece that matters most. They don't feel stupid. And when you try, like most people will never go into a bike shop and try and buy a bike because you feel stupid. I get it. I felt so dumb the first time.
Yeah.
And so that's what we want. Like here, I'm going to play something with you and the people listening. So let's just say I'm going to have you run a lap around the track as fast as you can. It's 400 meters. So picture this running of the lap, and it's not a trick. I want you to go at maximum effort. We're trying to get maximum, effort in this in the fastest possible time. So
100% at the start. So I self at 100%.
Yeah, I want you to do your best strategy to maximize your performance, and performance is based upon time. So you'll do a fast acceleration. You'll continue accelerating for 50 meters, and then you're going to kind of settle a little bit, but you're going to stay on the gas. Now, you'll pass 100 meters. You'll come up into 200 meters. Now, from 200 meters on,
still going.
What's going to happen though is that I want you to think about this, is that you're going to be on the gas and you're pushing, but somewhere between that 200 meter point and the finish, you're going to feel this urge that tells you to slow down. Meaning, if you continue this intensity, you continue this effort, if I don't slow down, I'm not going to finish. It's where doubt creeps into your head. It's where the unknown, it may be frustration, it may be feeling like a massive level of intensity is coming on. And there's a trigger where the brain is saying to you, if you don't slow down, we're just not going to finish. Now, everyone that's listening will have a specific distance where that triggers. So like for me, it's between 240 and 250 meters. If I get past that, like to 300, it kind of goes away because I'm getting close to the finish line, right? My confidence starts coming back. Yeah. But let me ask you, did you have a specific distance where doubt would come in?
Yeah, if I was going to go flat out, and I find this a lot of my running, I sometimes I bounce a bit at the start. Like I feel like I'm truly like sort of flying. I'd say my younger self when I was less fit, you know, when you were little, when you look, it was a lot earlier. Mm-hmm. But now it would be, if I was going flat out, it would be less than 200 meters. It'd be like 150, 200 sort of distance. So you're halfway, you still see there's quite a bit. And I could convince myself I'm going to finish. So for me, it wouldn't be about not finishing, but it would be from going 100% to not slowing down a little bit. It would be drop half. It'd be like, okay, I'm just going to slowly get over the edge. That would be.
So now there's two things there. Let's just say that you never felt that. What would it say about your approach on that 400? That you never felt any anxiety like that, what you just described? What would it say about, your execution of that workout. Did you go too slow? Of course. It's a way for you to assess your performance, right? What if you feel that in the first 50 meters or 100 meters? You're way early. Then you attack too fast. So it's a way for you to assess your strategy because it's your strategy, right? The other piece is that you now, let's say you do it and you feel that fatigue, that doubt creep in right where you said it was going to be. This is where coaching a lot of people, it's important. And what I always do is share anything that I learn. You have to ask yourself, it's not an anomaly, meaning it's not just one person, it's universal. Well, if it happens to every single runner, then what is happening, right? There's something that's happening. And what's happening in that moment is the brain is telling you that you're going into a non-sustainable pace. And if you don't slow down, the accumulation of fatigue is going to shut you down. Most people aren't aware that the brain is giving you these cues. And so what I try and do is empower them. Because ultimately, that's where your greatness comes from. It's like, I know what I'm doing. Like if you did a zone 2, are you going to do a bunch of dynamic drills? Or are you just going to go out and run? You're going to just go out and run because you're going to warm up in that workout. There's no risk of getting a muscle strain due to range of motion. And that's what people just don't know. So you teach them through the performance of the workout and they learn it. I'm not shoving it. They do it and going, hey, something cool really happened today. The real holy grail in programming, in my opinion, is can you through a workout improve someone's mental and emotional resiliency as well as physical capability at the same time? That to me is where I'm going. Writing workouts so that occurs. And it's not where you're saying, you big dummy, you didn't know, like that's what happens. It is your discovery. You're going to experience it. All I do is tell you how, like after when it's all done, did you feel that fatigue when you thought it would? Well, maybe next time what you should do is either slow down and pick it up.
I think that's a really good approach on and even a medium to long term, in that I go through these things, I find my failure points, you don't tell me where it is, and then I find them through over time. But for a lot of people, especially younger people, because they play more sport than people of older ages, a lot of them it's performance based.
Yeah.
So they're in that soccer match, they're in that basketball game, they're in that cross country, and they can't say there is no second basketball final. There is no second yearly cross country. They can't be like, oh, I should have practiced that 10 times, because as a young kid or a busy person in an office, they're unlikely to be able to put that in.
Yep.
So in that time when you face that block, in the moment, they're inexperienced and they don't have the time to try and fix it. In the moment, how do I go about getting over that block? How do I go in my mind and be like, that's just a block, let's get over it, without just fainting because I've completely ignored when I push way past my limit?
So your training should mimic your sport. So if we're talking about rugby, then you need to be looking at your position, and you need to be breaking down that position in terms of total volume, but also how does that volume accumulate? Like what is the way in which it's accumulating? So the min-max in terms of distances. And then last piece is what are the speeds that you're going to be doing within those? And then what is the typical recovery? And is it standing around recovery, or is it walking recovery? And then what about substitutions? How long is your substitution? So what you want to do is you want to look at your variables that you're actually training and make it as specific as possible. So let's just say that you're a military guy, and let's just say that you're in special forces, and it's like, you know what? I'm in an open helicopter and I'd be sitting there carrying a 60-pound rock, and I could be holding it for an hour of time. And so, okay, I got some low back issues. Well, now what happens when the helicopter lands? You know what? I've got a 200-meter sprint at maximum intensity. That's the furthest I would ever go, and the shortest would be 50. Okay, great. How about climbing stairs? Max 6 flights with rut. Okay, So we now are laying out these variables where we can create these parameters. We create the programming around the parameters so that, one, you become more physically capable, but two, you're mentally capable. I got it. And too many times what's happening is there's no relevance, there's no purpose behind the workout. So like early on, like, playing rugby, it's like, I would ask you right away, top level, in a rugby match, at the end, when you evaluate your performance, what was limiting your ability to run? What if I said you were going to be less fatigued, meaning at the end, you were less fatigued, muscular fatigue, cardiorespiratory fatigue. Or what limited your ability was your speed, your power output, your intensity, that you just kept getting beat. Well, those are opposites. Speed, strength, power, force, right? High intensity, fast twitch, anaerobic, and then aerobic recovery, fatigue resistance, the ability to clear fatigue. They're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So if you tell me, you know what, I wish I had the ability to endure, my speed dropped off. It was great at the start, but I just couldn't hang for the last 15 minutes. Then what I'm going to do is build capacity. I'm going to make you go long and slow. I'm going to build that ability to endure. I'm going to give you more volume. I drive the specific adaptation, but as athletes, unfortunately, they never know what they never know what they need. That's the problem. So if I ask you, how many push-ups can you do unbroken? Let's just say you can do 20. Let's say your goal is to do 10 more. Well, I would ask you, all right, I'll be your coach. Tell me why you can't do the 10 more. And it's a very simple answer. The problem is even a world champion may not know. And the answer is that I need to work on my strength, right? It's my one record.
Yeah, my strength burns. Like I'm stuck. Well,
right.
Yeah,
but
stuck.
What if you were less tired? What if I can clear fatigue at a faster rate? So as you're moving to that 20 reps, you were less tired. You had more stamina. Your ability to recover was improved. You see, you can't just shove more speed, more push-ups in. Eventually, you have to remove that fatigue. So is it in rugby, what's limiting your ability to do more work? Is it, I just am getting tired. I'm slowing way down towards the end of the match, right? I can't maintain my speed. My starting speed's impressive, but I just can't endure. Then what we're going to do is we're working on your ability to recover. We're working on your stamina. We're working on the slow twitch side of the equation. But some people, even when the gun goes off, they get dropped. They just don't have the speed. Well, in that case, what we have to work on is the other side. You need to prioritize the weakness. The problem is that the coach needs to help the athlete answer that question because you can't do everything.
I've got 3 final questions. The first one, again, selfishly, is a question that applies to my own life. Going back to the idea of breath. I read a book. I was just checking. I think it's called Breathe by James Nestor. I don't know if you've read that book.
Yeah.
And I don't read that many books. I probably should read more, being at Ducal. But I don't really like reading that much. But this is a book that I read and got from the start to the end. And the main takeaway that I had from it was I should breathe through my nose. That, there's a lot of people online saying you should cover your mouth at night. Breathing through your nose is the best thing to do. And so I've kind of taken that into my own life. And whenever I can, when I'm running, when I'm playing sport, when I'm walking, I'm trying to breathe through my nose. I'm trying to cover my mouth up.
Good.
What you said, when I'm running, I should be trying to use my mouth. So to what extent is breathing through your nose or breathing through your mouth? Does it matter? Does it not matter? I get hay fever. When my nose blocks up, I just can't breathe through my nose. And my mental side is saying, oh my God, Harvey, you're going to get really fat and stuff because you can't breathe through your nose. So what's the fact on that?
Yeah. I mean, you could even have a deviated septum, right? You can't breathe through your nose. And so, so I've read that book.
I think I've got that problem as well. I might have a deviated septum. That might be the problem. So
I'm going to tell you something. So I had a deviated septum and, I didn't get it cleared until after I was done competing. What it gave me was phenomenal. And I look back and that should have been something I addressed early on. And it was a mistake. That was one of major mistakes. I should have had it addressed when I was, in my prime. So I've read that book too. And one of the pieces that you have to recognize is that nasal breathers will say they can breathe through their nose and do high intensity. The definition of high intensity is what's in question. The intensity scale is an intensity scale that is based upon nasal breathing. It's the same thing if you were on a ketogenic diet. The body processes carbohydrates much easier than it does fat. If you want to do high intensity training, then you have to have carbohydrates available. Can you do high intensity on a ketogenic diet? Of course you can if it's on a ketogenic scale. But if we're talking about a scale that someone with more balanced carbohydrate ingestion, nutrition, their intensity level will be higher than someone on keto. It's the same thing when the intensity gets really high. Like if I'm giving you 400 meter repeats on the track and they're fast, like, let's say they're at your 3K PR pace, you're going to not get enough air through the nose. You're going to be forced to breathe through your mouth. And so that's what nasal breathers talk about. You get too much air through the mouth. And what we need to do is we need to be controlling the amount of air coming in, right? Training a different level of resistance. And there's all kinds of other benefits. So it is highly valuable. But the question really is when is it usable? And this is also one of the pieces that's really confusing for a lot of people. When would you use it? Because it sounds like you need to do it all the time. And the answer is that's not true. You're utilizing it as your definition of low intensity training, zone 2. So you should be able to breathe through your nose if you don't have obstruction and hay fever, like you mentioned, through your nose, in and out through your nose in zone 2. If you go in ballpark, 165 was your upper limit of zone 2. If you go to 166, in theory, you won't be able to get enough air to support that intensity through your nose, and you'd be forced to supplement with mouth breathing. It is a way for you to define what we call zone 2 or aerobic threshold or easy pace, RPE3 pace. That's how we do it. So if you do a VO2 max test, typically for the people listening is where you are getting half of your energy from fat and half of it is coming from carbohydrates. It's the balance. It's what we call aerobic threshold. So if you go faster than that, then you're going to be burning more carbs. But we can use nasal breathing as a way of monitoring the intensity. Same thing they say with talk test. So if you're able to continuously tell me a story and you're not getting interrupted by an inhale for oxygen, then you're more than likely in zone 2. So there's tools that athletes can use to monitor their intensity. The best one, though, in my opinion, is breathing in and out through your nose at low intensity. Now, what will happen is, as we mentioned earlier, that 6-minute pace, you'll be able to make it at 6-minute pace for 20 minutes in and out of your nose. So what do you do for continuous improvement? Even if you don't breathe through your nose, what's the continuous improvement? I would tell you, I want to see, 25 minutes. Same rules. Walking if you go by 5 and then running again. Other piece would be don't go 6 minutes per 1,000. Let's drop it down to 550. Let's make it go faster. Now, can you breathe through your nose? So what you want to do is continue pushing and it will improve. But at some point in time, you're just not going to inhale enough air through the nose. It's like those training masks, right? They used to have those masks that simulate altitude, and all it is you're breathing through 2 straws. You have to be really careful of hurting real bad and going slow. I want you to hurt real bad and go fast. That's the problem, is that if you hurt real bad, you're teaching the muscles to hurt real bad and go slow. I want you, when you hurt real bad, I want you moving. I want speed. I want high intensity. I want output.
My penultimate question for you is, what's next?
I have a couple of really good projects that I'm working on, and I donate a lot of time, a lot. And I really believe that if you are flexible with your vision, opportunity exists everywhere, but you cannot have walking in the door massive expectation. Like you're not doing it for anything other than this could be a very good learning experience. And maybe someone will notice my work product and maybe I'll get another opportunity. I have a project with the U.S. Army that just came up in a conversation, and it was a postpartum fit for duty program. And it's where women are really, really struggling with getting fit for duty and passing their physical fitness tests. And it's something that is very appealing to me. I have 3 kids, and I'm not, I'm not an expert in that experience, but I feel like I'm an expert in the progression to get someone to pass their physical fitness test. It's a massive project, and it will take me a long, long, long time to kind of vet it all out and put the science in it. And I'll get nothing for it, 0, and I'll give it away for free. But maybe that will get noticed by the U.S. Army, and maybe that will lead to something else. And so that's a project that I'm involved in. The other big thing that we're doing, which it took me at least a year to get in, was High Rocks. High Rocks is, in the UK, it's one of by far the biggest rowing sports. Every time there's a High Rocks, they're doing heats every 10 minutes for 2 days. 15,000 people show up at, XL arenas, and it's one of the pieces that I've spent a lot of time. So they're doing an educational course called a level 1. And I was one of, I think, the 8 modules that went into their level 1, which I'm really flattered by. And then we're doing a seminar for High Rocks as well. And so that's exciting because, like I said, I love the education piece more so than the programming piece.
I was speaking to my dad yesterday because he's 50 years old.
Oh, he's in his
prime.
And
he's in his prime.
Yeah.
And
he doesn't need to walk and ruck. He needs to run. Forget.
He needs to run. I'll let him know. But he's 50 years old, and he has run his own business for almost 10 years. And a few years ago, he decided to build a startup. And similarly, with my younger brothers playing rugby and me trying to do this podcast, I don't know what the future will hold from it. And I draw a parallel between that and you with your work for the army, is that I've found that sometimes if you just do good things and you do something because you know it's good, you don't know what the outcome will be, but you should do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. And that's where it comes out. It's like, you got to take a little risk, right? And it's not easy. I get it, but everybody else should get it too, right? I've never wrote a postpartum program, but you know what I have done is I've done a lot of the protocols that are in the program. And I believe that I'm the best that there is at doing that. And so when I, make delivery and I've let people look at it and play around with it, it's like, it's a process, and we're going to all work on this thing together. I'm not possessive in the things that I do. Like if you did one of my seminars and you asked me a question, so long as it wasn't proprietary to an athlete, like they're like a result in a workout, I'm going to share with you. And I find that too many times nowadays, especially with influencers, is they're guarded. They feel like their secret sauce is intellectual property. Yeah. And I'm not that way. What I feel is it should be opposite of that. If you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you what I know. I'm going to be honest and truthful and if I don't know, I'm just going to tell you I don't know. But what I'm trying to do is push this out there to have interaction like you are and me to learn what's next. Where do we go next? And so like most programs right now today, when you look at training programs, it's all based upon speed, right? How fast are you running? How fast do you run? Well, let's just say, like we mentioned about your dad and rucking and carrying a load to get his heart rate up, but he's going to walk. I would write for your dad a workout that's based upon cadence. How many steps per minute is he easy walking, which probably is somewhere around 120. And then if he did a fast walk, like a surge, it would probably jump up to 130. How does he measure it? Just counts his number of steps per 30 seconds. So we can write workouts with varying intensities based upon cadence. That's never done.
I know you said this wasn't a sales call, but you might put yourself a customer. I might try and put my dad and touch the office call. So if no one has a list to, you'll get one. But I have one last sub question for my question. I feel like I run an unbelievable amount, and I was thinking if we did another podcast in a year's time or so, I'd ask this. I just have to ask it now because the way my brain works, I will never let it go. Yeah. It's a combination of three little parts. Something that I don't think we've talked about today. We've talked mostly about like the training aspect.
Yeah.
But I think perhaps even a bigger aspect is in terms of recovery, and not only just recovery, your diet, your sleep, and your routine. I was wondering if you could talk a bit beyond the simple bit in that if you get enough sleep, if you eat healthy foods and you cut out, shitty, sugary foods, you'll be healthy. I don't know if there was any color or you could provide on that, but about how people can not just lead a healthier way of life, but sort of optimize those things for athletic performance.
So I'm going to answer that two parts. So in terms of general public, I'm not the guy for that. That's more of a specialty, and I am suspect of the family medicine coach that says they could do everything. Like, for example, I'm going to give you an example. So let's talk weightlifting. I was with an Olympian weightlifter and we were watching somebody lift, and I was fascinated by their ability to sit in a chair and watch 5 people pick up a barbell and offer insights. And so I said, do you see the lift after it's done? And the answer was yes. I see it long afterwards. And I could see a lift like months later in my head and offer cues of where did the lift go out of position. And so same thing for me. In running, I see it's a curse because you see people running down the road and you see the foot strike. You see that this is a high risk of injury. You see where the potential, right? And it's not my place to just nose in there. I won't do it, but it's like, you want to help. You don't want people to look back and go like, oh man, I wish I knew that. Like, you want to give them the cheat code. But when I look at a weightlifter, I close my eyes afterwards and it's just dark, black. There's nothing there. And so today, if you really want to maximize, you've got to find almost like a specialist that understands these pieces on a higher level. Now, when it comes to competing, that's different. I know, like from a nutrition standpoint, it's different.
Is there a routine point though? Although the diet, sure, there might be someone else, but is there a morning routine thing? Like if they wake up every morning, get a cold shower, or don't eat before you train, or is that sort of a different area of specialty?
So I will say that if it's training, and one of the pieces that has a lot of momentum nowadays is training their endurance workout. So like a zone 2, and doing it in a fasted state. So almost in a ketogenic state. So what will happen is they'll work out the night before, let's say, and they'll eat a very light dinner, if any dinner. The next morning, they may do a small lifting session or nothing. And then somewhere mid-afternoon, they'll do their endurance workout. And what they're trying to do is do it where there's very little carbohydrates to force the use of fat as the primary fuel source, to become more fat adapted, to be more metabolically balanced. And that is something that it's been around for a long time. But it's very important that most people are aware that, yes, high intensity, it absolutely is a protocol for burning fat, right? The post-workout consumption during recovery, your metabolic rate is raised, but you're still recovering, right? The intensity is low, and that recovery comes from the burning of fat. So that's one way. But the other way is by doing workouts that are long and slow, easy intensity, zone 2. But if you could do it in a fasted state, then your body becomes more efficient at the consumption of fat as fuel. So there's certain workouts where there's fuel manipulation, but most of it comes from post-workout recovery protocols and timeliness of that. Yeah, I would absolutely refer it to, like, I have there's specialty people. that it's almost like medicine nowadays. You have to specialize because
My final question.
everybody's priority is different, right? So let's just say that you weigh, you're 200 pounds overweight. Your priority should be on the nutrition side. You have to prioritize. Like I said earlier, you can't do speed and endurance and drive them both in parallel. You've got to prioritize while maintaining. So you're creating that structure. Yeah, I mean, I've listened to like your podcast and same thing. It's like sleep's highly important, but okay, what does that mean? And what's the drawback of, I hear like 7 hours and the impact it has. It adds a pound per week of fat. Yeah, it's not that simple. But you see the study, but you need someone to help you.
My final question, and I ask this to every guest, is the following. What is one thing that you would want a listener to take away from this podcast? It could be either something that you have said or that you haven't said.
I think that for me, I think about back when I just roll back the clock and just my journey. You really have to find people that will listen to you and support you, even if your dream may seem like far-fetched and wild. I want to encourage people to dream. I want to encourage people to imagine. And if you come to me with a dream as a coach, not anything other than being a coach, then what I want to do is I want to help bring that to life. And you and I talked about this earlier, is that dream that you have may morph into some other opportunity that you don't even know exists. For example, I wasn't the greatest swimmer, but it morphed into triathlons, which if I didn't do triathlons, you and I wouldn't even be having this conversation. And so what I really would encourage people to take risk, and whether in anything, and to show that you have courage, because that is where the confidence is going to come from. But if you don't have somebody in your life that is willing to listen and support those dreams, then you got to find somebody else, because it's so hard to take risk. And if people don't buy into your journey, then it's just not a fit. And I was very, very lucky to have 3 conversations in my life that changed my entire trajectory. And it's amazing after 60 years that I can identify those conversations, and that made up my whole life. And imagine if someone told me in one of those moments, that's a stupid idea.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think you can tell from the amount of time that we spoke that my mind is just filled with ideas about where we could take these things.
That's awesome.
I think training is so applicable to so many different areas.
Yeah.
From the military to being a CrossFit champion to being an office worker to being a kid. And I think there's a lot to take away from that, because I think when even myself, I'm guilty of thinking to become the best in a field, it's about how much can I push? How many hours of sleep can I give up? How hard can I push myself to get there? Because everyone looks at the best and they're like, they're lifting these incredible weights. That means I have to lift these weights. But the way that you've broken it down from finding people's own natural limits and pushing past those to actually finding, okay, here's my barrier. How can I push past that? And finding these really incremental steps to actually become great and what it means to be great, I think is incredible. And I hope that anyone listening to this podcast can take that into their own life and also check out your business to learn more. So thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.